Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We had to reschedule live, so I hope that you'll be coming here very shortly. Now, the Caribbean is being sold off. Who owns our land and resources? The Caribbean is being sold off. Who owns our land and resources? That's the question that we're asking this evening. For generations, Caribbean people have been told that independence means we are masters of our own destiny. But what happens when the land beneath our feet, the beaches along our shores, the hotels in our tourist capitals, the ports that connect us to the world, and even our natural resources increasingly come under foreign ownership and control? Across the Caribbean, billions of dollars are flowing into real estate, tourism, infrastructure, and energy, agriculture, and other strategic sectors. Foreign investment can bring jobs, capital, and development, but it also raises a fundamental question. At what point does investment become ownership, and at what point does ownership become control? Who owns the land? Who owns the hotels? Who controls the ports, the mines, energy resources, and valuable coastal property? And how much of the wealth generated from Caribbean resources actually remains in Caribbean hands? This is not simply a question about foreigners buying our property. It is a question about economic sovereignty, because political independence means very little if the people who live on these islands increasingly have no control over the assets, resources, and land that determine their economic future. So this afternoon, we're asking a question that every Caribbean nation needs to confront. Are we developing our countries, or are we gradually selling them off? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, when future generations look back at this period, will they find that we built wealth for the Caribbean or transferred ownership of the Caribbean to someone else? This is a very important question that you and I need to discuss and to analyze in this afternoon's broadcast. Now we have what's the Caribbean without beaches, but the people are losing access to them in many countries. Walk along a Caribbean beach, which may stretch for miles, and your stroll is guaranteed to be cut short by an angry hotel security guard. In recent years, the Caribbean has seen a worrying trend of governments readily selling off assets to foreign corporations and political financiers. Prime real estate, protected land, and valuable resources are being relinquished without consideration for long-term consequences. It raises questions about whether remnants of the colonial mindset still prevail in political ideologies and decision-making. Countries that sell off their citizens' birthright can find themselves regretting such decisions. Often, corruption scandals tend to accompany these transactions, further eroding public trust in government, while developers' poor environmental practices surface to tarnish the reputation of the region and irreversibly damage fragile ecosystems. Corruption, unfortunately, goes unnoticed by most local people. And I must say that oftentimes we don't care until we've lost everything and we are enslaved again. Development in the Caribbean cannot mirror the patterns in Europe or the US. I repeat that development in the Caribbean cannot mirror the patterns in Europe or the US. Politicians mistakenly view initiatives through the lens of their favorite travel destinations, such as Miami, New York, or London. Skyscrapers, large motorways, and vanity projects diverts money from true development priorities such as education and health, and ignores the unique value and inherent beauty of the Caribbean. So we all want to have skyscrapers, and people are using those to symbolize that we are developed, when that does not say whether or not we're developed. Because if we don't have good education system, if we don't have proper amenities in our hospitals, then what are we talking about? If we don't have proper roads on which to drive, or those roads we don't own, as we're seeing in many Caribbean states, we're seeing where the Chinese and other people are developing these roads, and people have to pay huge tolls to ride on them. Environmental challenges and the need for sustainability demand careful consideration. Pollution, beach and soil erosion, coral reefs and marine life, overfishing, pesticides, chemical and industrial waste management, and the aesthetics of the country must be factored into development plans. But oftentimes our politicians do not do that because they want us to think that we're living in first world nations. Most Caribbean nations are classified as small island developing states, making them particularly vulnerable to the climate crisis. So the responsibility to pursue sustainable development is even more crucial. However, numerous Caribbean governments engage in invitational development, offering incentives and benefits, including tax exemptions, to attract foreign developers. Typically, promises of employment and opportunities to stimulate the economy and benefit the local population tend to fall short. Instead, most of the jobs created are low-skilled positions that offer minimal wages, while the highest paid management roles are filled by foreign workers. Consequently, the profits generated by these developments are repatriated to tax havens or foreign investors. The privatization of beaches and the controversial sale of prime heritage or beachfront sites to developers have become normalized throughout the Caribbean, leaving citizens access to public spaces threatened as the region's natural beauty and cultural birthright is jeopardized. In St. Lucia, for example, the government initially turned down an application to sell land adjoining the Pitons to two volcanic peaks at Anse, and that is in Le Ivron, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The decision was reversed and the land sold to Jeffrey Robillard, a senior executive in the Canadian retail chain Dollarama, owned by the billionaire Rossi family. The construction undertaken by the Canadians outraged St. Lucians at home and abroad because of its magnitude and location, which blocked public access to the well-loved landscape or landmark. Similar controversies have happened in other Caribbean countries. In 2015, Antigua and Barbuda approved selling a 99-year lease on several public beaches with the option to renew for another 50 years to a private developer involving the Australian billionaire James Packer and the actor Robert De Niro, leading to community protests. In the Bahamas, legislation passed in 2018 allowed for the sale of long leases of crown land, including beaches, to foreign investors. Environmentalists and locals voiced their concerns, fearing that the sale could irreparably damage the country's authentic charm and historical legacy. Jamaica, too, has experienced protests over plans to change rights of access to a public beach in favor of a foreign hotel developer. Residents argued that the sale would deprive them of access to the beach and harm the environment, but the Jamaican government proceeded, citing the need to attract investment and create jobs. That is what they tell us, that they want to create jobs, but at whose expense? And Caribbean citizens need to ask these very important questions. There has been growing apprehension among the construction of hotels and other developments along the Jamaican coastline, with critics asserting that building projects were eroding beaches and damaging marine habitats. In 2022, the land adjoining Jamaica's Bob Marley Beach in Bull Bay, known as a cherished spiritual retreat for the late star, faces a potential sale for the construction of a new hotel. Once again, citizens face the risk of losing a public beach, fishers face losing their livelihoods, and the Rastafarian community face land dispossession. And we're seeing in Jamaica, where we're seeing in Trelawney, right now, they are bulldozing people's properties, calling them squatters, and people are left without homes. Barbados faced its share of criticism in 2021 when plans emerged of proposed land or sale of land on the island's west coast to the Sandals luxury resort developer, which would have resulted in the privatization of a popular beach. However, after a public outcry, the government decided to cancel the sale, demonstrating the power of citizen engagement in safeguarding public resources. In Trinidad and Tobago, there have been instances where development initiatives have sparked debate. The proposed construction in 2017 of a hotel by Sandos in Tobago was subject to concerns over restricted beach access and potential damage to marine life. The project was abandoned 2 years later due to public outrage and what Sandoz saw as damage to its brand becoming untenable. And Sandoz is a local Jamaican company, so even our own Caribbean people are actually colonizing their fellow Caribbean citizens. Can you imagine that? Now, interestingly, Trinidad and Tobago is often perceived to never protest against anything except for the carnival's cancellation. Social media has been its placard, so instead of wielding slogans in the sun or risking a beating by an intolerant police force, they wave their concerns on Instagram and TikTok in the coolness and safety of their homes. Trinidad and Tobago have seen developments that have raised eyebrows, but the response from the public has always been muted. For example, the construction of the first movie town complex in Port of Spain, built by a local Chinese business person in the early 2000s, encroached upon a critically important mangrove forest. However, opposition was almost non-existent. Similarly, the construction of a water park by a local Syrian business person in the protected Chaguaramas area, that is the Chaguaramas area, despite affecting beach access and contributing to environmental pollution and incessant traffic, did not generate significant public outcry. Ironically, local citizens have for decades experienced poor water supplies. In Tobago, the thought of possible projects at the picture-perfect Pigeon Point Beach sends salivating developers to start enticing politicians with their latest ideas. So in stark contrast to these examples, a recent decision by Anguilla's government stands out. Late last year, the British Overseas Territory decided to end cruise tourism as the negative environmental impact outweighed the revenue generated. This decision demonstrates that a more responsible and forward-thinking approach to sustainable development can happen in the region. Caribbean governments must recognize that the pursuit of economic growth and foreign direct investment should not come at the expense of environmental degradation or their citizens' well-being. Prioritizing short-term gains or mimicking the practices of more developed nations are unlikely to end well. Instead, there is a need for astute and sustainable development initiatives that consider the region's unique environmental challenges. The long-term protection of the Caribbean's natural resources, beaches, marine life, and other fragile ecosystems should be paramount. Caribbean governments must promote greater transparency and citizen engagement. Local communities' concerns and aspirations must be heard and factored into decision-making. Efforts to preserve. So we are seeing where in Barbuda and also in Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean, they're actually buying up beachfront homes and then they are, locking access. They're denying access to residents who want to use their local beaches. This is a problem that we should be highlighting, and we should ensure that we are not slaves in the Caribbean as they are making us into becoming. So let us look at a few. I saw this clipping here, and I thought that this is something that I need to highlight. Jamaica being sold out. Let's begin there with this young man speaking on behalf of many Jamaicans who can't speak for themselves.
That they're going to sell off Jamaica to non-Jamaicans.
Oh, this is
Okay. So right now here in Montego Bay, they have these 4 buildings that went up, the highest buildings ever in Jamaica. I think they're 28 stories. And they sold the land, this beautiful parcel of land, it looks kind of like a peninsula, to 2 brothers who immigrated to Jamaica, right? And in their synopsis, they said like, oh, we left China to make our fortune and we migrated to Jamaica, and we are building these hotels, and they're not hotels. If I'm not mistaken, they're going to be apartment buildings, right? So they migrated to Jamaica to for a better life for themselves and for their families. They were able to convince the Jamaican government. They sat in a room with Jamaican politicians, Jamaican government, and they convinced the Jamaican government that Jamaica should be turned into Miami Beach, South Beach. It should be turned into Rio de Janeiro. It should be turned into Panama. It should be turned into a concrete jungle. Jamaica is not a cosmopolitan city, nor should it be. Jamaica is an amazingly beautiful island that has an incredible powerhouse of energy that is mind blowing for anyone who is a human being and in touch with their feeling. You can feel that energy that's emitting from Jamaica. So frightened for what is going on in Jamaica because I'm sure that this isn't the only parcel of land that they've sold off to foreigners. They're going to basically start, which I'm sure they've already done, chopping up Jamaica and selling it off, and not to the Jamaicans. When they sell it off to foreigners, they're basically going to turn it into kind of like Hawaii, right? But the difference between Hawaii and Jamaica is that Hawaii was stolen from the Hawaiians by the Americans. It was colonized, right? The Americans came in, they're like, you know what? We really like your island. It's fucking gorgeous and we want it. And so they basically went in and they strong armed the Hawaiians. They forbade the Hawaiians to speak their language. They basically eliminated the natural language of Hawaii. And so the Hawaiians had to speak English, and they basically stole the people's land. So now Hawaiians can't afford to buy land in their own country. They cannot. A lot of them are homeless. So the difference is that Jamaica was not colonized. Well, it was, but we got our independence, and we got our
Okay, so
independence.
we've seen what she's saying, and she's spot on with what she's suggesting about how these developers are going to parts of the Caribbean, specifically Jamaica and other parts, and they are actually buying up these very prime properties. And what is going to happen eventually that we are going to be denied access to a lot of the resources and the lands that should be ours. In recent times, I'm sorry I did not really pull that up. Right now, Jamaica is having a problem with the government in recent times, up to yesterday, going into a particular part of Jamaica called Trelawney and bulldozing down people's homes, saying that they're there to develop the nation. Now, many of us are quite, what should I say now? We are not very happy with it. At the same time, we want development, but we want to be free. Now, we have to choose either or. Do we want full independence, or do we want our land and to be able to determine what we should do with our lands? Because our government is totally ignoring us and our rights. But we find the Caribbean citizens are now trying to mimic what they see in so-called first world countries, and at our peril, we're going to find that very soon we are going to lose everything in the region. Good evening, everyone. And we have Pompey saying Guyana, Africa, sons and daughters. Is it daughters here or daughters from slavery? Now America became a bandit country because they believe that bombs could change a country or stop persons from making the country and African people. Correct. I think we all share that opinion. Political independence, freedom from foreign interference, means nothing without economic independence, freedom from foreign ownership of our natural resources, lands, and the means of production. This is well said, right? This is well said. And we can understand that we are not free in light of what he's saying, which he's right. Marcus Garvey did say this is nothing new. He was saying the same thing, that if we are not economically independent, then we are practically not free. We are just colonies of the Europeans, of the first world countries, as it were. Now, the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they press. African American abolitionist movement leader Frederick Douglass said. Absolutely. And you know, one of the things about it, though, we are in the Caribbean where we understand all of this. Many of our leaders understand all of this theoretical, understanding of freedom, but they can't find themselves putting into practice what they already know. Something is wrong with us as people. We can quote and we have beautiful statements. At the same time, when it comes on to getting things done, we cannot get it done, right? I've heard many white people in Jamaica say one of the things that they know about Jamaica is that they have beautiful words on paper, but to get things done, they can't get it done. What is wrong with us? Something is definitely wrong with us as a Caribbean people. Now, African is saying if you want to understand any problem in any country, you need to focus on who profits from that problem, not who suffers from that problem. And that is from Dr. Amos N. Wilson. Well said. Now, good afternoon, David Freighter. And we have soldering Jamaica is not now. How long Chinese, Syrian, Indian, etc. is black people sold foreigner their land instead their own? Absolutely. Now, what has been happening is that our leaders are selling off the land, and our people or citizens are not standing up against what they're doing. I think we are mesmerized by what we see as development. So when we see some skyscrapers, some nice roads, KFC. Right now, you're online and you are there saying who has the best KFC. Does Trinidad and Tobago? Does Jamaica? Does Guyana? And that is what they're doing, right? You're not there talking about these things, right? And getting into the depth of what is happening in the region. You are there to claim who is more colonized from who is not. That is what you're doing. When you're talking about, KFC, that has nothing to do with the Caribbean per se. And we have great foods in the Caribbean that we should not be better. You're saying who has the better pilau or the better curry chicken, that is okay, because that is our making. We are the ones who are producing that. But to say who has the best KFC is ridiculous, and it shows where our minds are, that we are in fact colonized. Now, then we have the Freighter is saying here, David Freighter is saying again, bauxite companies, etc., over the years rape, I should say, our resources. Absolutely. Exactly what they're doing. But we also have to be responsible. We have to hold our leaders to account. And oftentimes, because of our political affiliation, we're PNMs or UNCs or PNP or GLP, we find that we don't have the courage, the moral courage to stand up for what is right, because we allow the politics to cloud our vision and to cloud our opinions. And we have to make sure that we don't allow that to happen. Okay, very important that we do that. Let's look at another clipping from Dr. Umar Johnson. I think that some people, our foreigners, are calling us out, and we have to listen, because sometimes when you're living in your own country, you don't see what is happening until a foreigner explains to you what really is happening in your own country. It's not there yet. Sorry.
They've given them tax abatements, and they also purchased, if I'm not mistaken, the port. The main port of Jamaica. All right, they own the port. Is owned by the Chinese. Exactly. If another race owns your port, that means they control what's coming in. They control what's going out. What about the drugs? What about the guns? What about the COVID? You don't know what them people bringing in. And you mean to tell me that the Chinese care so much about Jamaican people that they're not going to educate our kids and take care of their health? Chinese don't care about black folks. Go to China. Go to China and see how they treat black people in China. So to me, what I think this is the government of Jamaica, like so many African governments, so many other Caribbean governments have done. They've gotten in bed financially with the Chinese. The Chinese have studied the way the white man has practiced neo-colonialism throughout Africa. And the Chinese has learned that these black leaders don't really care about their people. They're all about their pocket. So I'm going to do what the white man did, but I'm going to do it one time better. I'm going to offer them double the money. You let me take over this land right here. I'll give the white man offer you $1 million. I'm offering you $3 million. And I'm going to build you a retirement home. And I'm going to pay for all your kids to go to college in China. You follow what I'm saying? And I'm going to give you a private military. So the Chinese have basically become neo-colonialists 2.0.
Right. So this is what we need to look at. But whenever we talk about the Chinese, the sort of very poor ability to reason that you hear, also what America is doing, and it's almost like we expected that America should be our saviors who should come and build our roads and build our bridges. So because the Chinese is doing it now, you think that's okay, but you're not looking at what they're doing and the secretive deals that they have with our government. You don't look at that. What you're more interested in is to see wonderful bridges, wonderful roads, which are nice, but you must understand that these gifts come at a cost. And what is the cost to the country and to the citizens and to future generations? And that is what people are not really discussing at all in the Caribbean. We're comparing apples to oranges and suggesting that the United States is much more of an empire than China. And then when we wake up, we are going to realize that our natural resources have been bought up by the Chinese people. And I've told you too that the United States elites and the Chinese elites are one. They work together. The United States elites and the Chinese elites work together. Political elites, economic elites work together. So when you are there still living in the antiquated world in which you think that China is separate from the United States, don't get me wrong, they do have their issues, they do have their divisions, right? And you'd be stupid to think that they won't have divisions, because even among Trinidadians, even among Tobagonians and Jamaicans, we all have, even though we live on the same land and territory, we have divisions, and we're just one land and small. So you'd be stupid to think that China and the United States do not have differences. However, when it comes on to accessing people's resources and claiming it as theirs and controlling, they are one, right? The Bill Gates Foundation is in China. Elon Musk is in China, and vice versa. You have many Chinese people who have bought up elites, I'm talking about now, who have bought up states and resources and assets in the United States of America. But our people here, the literacy is so high. And I think that we need to move away from being schooled and being literate, right? Because if you're not understand what is happening in the economic realm, in the political realm, you are not literate, right? You can call words and people might think that you are functional on a job. But if you don't understand what is happening in the political realm and the economic realm, you are not fully literate. And that is what we're here to educate our people on this platform, that what we're seeing in the world is not as clearly and simple as what we're seeing and thinking that there's some war, somebody's fighting against war, and that's the end of it. And if this person wins, then you win. It doesn't work like that. You're not watching a movie, and many of us think we're still watching Hollywood, and this is not Hollywood. This is real life. Okay, this is real life. And every time I'm looking here at the region and Black people in general around the world, I can see why we actually sold out ourselves to the Europeans. Because things have not changed in terms of our mentality. Or the descendants of Africans, we have not really changed, So when we're sitting down and wondering how Europeans were able to go and conquer Africa so easily, we must look at ourselves right now, because it is happening in our generation when we so-called have all of this access to knowledge, right? Yet we are behaving even worse than the Africans there who sold their brothers and sisters into slavery. Because right now, our politicians, our economic elites, they are doing likewise. And your eyes are blind and you don't care. So why should they care? If you don't care, they shouldn't care. Now, African is saying we have an illiterate Black mass in the country. That's why the JLP, PNP parties have been allowed to get away with their wickedness. And as I'm saying African, it's not only the people who are illiterate in terms of not being able to call words and have some degrees behind their names. The people who are educated, so-called, at the University of the West Indies, and they've been to college abroad, they are likewise illiterate. And might I should say semi-literate. Because if they don't understand what is happening, which the majority don't, then how do we expect people who do not have, any access to education in terms of having a degree to understand what is happening. Because many university graduates don't really understand what is happening, or journalists don't understand what is happening. Because when I listen to Cliff Hughes and many of our journalists in the region, all they do is entertain, right? And they speak about superficial nonsense. They don't tell people what is happening in the global context and how these things are affecting the region. And this is where we find ourselves now. We don't understand context, and then we are right back on the plantation very, very shortly. Now, we have to look at what Miss Mia Motley is saying here. She is almost telling us that, we are living in a new era. And I want you to listen to her, right? She's telling us that we're living in a new era, and she's a part of the whole agenda, Miss Mia Motley. So listen to her as she tells you that we perhaps have lost our sovereignty because we're living now in a new rules-based order, as it were. So let us see what she's saying here. There is something I thought I had, and I didn't bring it to the show. Let me put her on the screen.
In the absence of an international rules-based order, and we are seeing it being threatened day by day, in the absence of an international rules-based order, countries such as ours will find it difficult to survive. And this, my friends, is the first real threat that we have had since becoming independent nations. The notion that others may want to conquer again is not beyond and not beyond our reality. But equally, the price of sovereignty is no longer simply that which we have started to do in the first 2 or 3 generations. The price of sovereignty now extends to our ability to control our information. We have to be able to own our own satellites and not be the victim of somebody pulling them on us because they do not like the position we took on a war across the world somewhere or someplace. We have to generate our own content because it is only us who know our reality, and we cannot simply be the victims of other people's judgment as to who we are and what we stand for. And if we don't do these things, then we will fail to recognize that the new Armada and the new flotilla are not the ships that came and brought our forefathers here under protest. But in fact, the new Armada and the new flotilla is that which will control our mind. And we know what Marcus Messiah Garvey told us about emancipating our mind from mental slavery. If ever there was a time for us to listen to these entreaties, it is now.
Okay, so what we're seeing here is that she's telling us that we're living in a new world, as it were, a new world order, as it were. Okay, where let me get this off. Okay, where we are not living in the same world as we were living in yesteryear. And many of you think that we're still living in the 1990s and the early 2000s. We are living in the post-COVID era. For those of you who don't understand, we're living in what is known as the post-COVID era, where your right is no longer a guarantee. And sovereignty is no longer a guarantee that these who can come and they can take up your land and nothing will happen to them. Nothing is going to happen to them. And that is what she's saying, that we have to now adapt to this new world order, to this new economic system, this new rules-based order that Trump is actually deciding to destroy. Right? That is what he's doing right now. So what are we going to do when we realize that our homes or lands or properties will be just taken from us without any sort of justice being dispensed? What are we going to do? Okay, because that is they are making this now the norm and not necessarily something that is abnormal. Okay, so we have to begin now to think what we are going to do with the rights that we think we have, that we are seeing being destroyed day after day. Okay, there was something I wanted to show you also that I did not bring with me. Let me see if I could pull that up, about this young man who was talking about, he gave a very good speech about what is happening in the Caribbean, specifically Jamaica. And this is something that I thought I had on the screen, but I did not. Let me see if I can find it, and bring it on the screen so that we can share that with you. I thought I'd had it with me when I came on the live, but unfortunately, I did not have it with me. Hopefully, I'll be able to see it. It doesn't seem like I am going to see it right now. Give me a few minutes, guys, and you can talk among yourselves while I'm looking for it. Hopefully, I'll find it very soon. It was a very good mini speech that he made that all of us should listen to. And I thought I'd saved it, but I did not bring it here with me. Let me see here. If I could pull something up here. Uh, um, yeah, so we've got to get our acts together so that we can. Oh, right, it's right here. It's right here. Let me see now if I can put it on the screen, because it would have been very terrible if I weren't able to get it. Okay, got it. Let me see, got it here. Okay, now I'm going to put it up on the screen and then share that with you right now so that you can see what is going on. This was a very good analysis of what is happening in the Caribbean and the fact that we're not as conscious as we think we are in this region. So let me just put that on the screen. Is it on the screen? Let me see if I can put it on the screen for you to see and get the volume up. Let me get the thing, add to the screen. Yeah, when things should be there on the screen is not coming, right? Let me see if I can get it quickly. Be patient with me. I thought it would have been on the screen already. All right, yeah, so let me get it on the screen right now and see if I can.
Generates wealth, everything that creates comfort for us.
Let me rewind it.
So it's the morning after. So it's the morning after. It's August 7th. So after the independence celebration, after all the festival and fanfare to generate the illusion of independence, you're here, August 7th. And you're probably having a hangover from the illusion or still disgust from what you believe people are not picking up, or just general apathy to the condition in this country. But whatever feeling you have, the reality did not change, and it still does not change, because we still have a government system, a way of organizing ourselves, which basically creates wealth for a few and dispossesses the many from the land, the resources, everything that generates wealth, everything that creates comfort for us. All because we're ruled by thieves and vampires. And those rules, those thieves and vampires are governed further, higher up on a hierarchy by elites who think we're less than humans. They don't think we're citizens. If you don't believe me, check out behind me. This is Roaring River, as far as well, many places that your eyes can see. And behind Roaring River, we as Jamaicans have created something of a record, not one to be envied for, of course, because we've sold a forest. We've given away a forest. It's called Roaring River for a reason. And it's not just one river, it's rivers roaring, roaring love, roaring happiness, roaring healing. Now it was few to make luxury homes and luxury apartments where we can't use these rivers anymore. And then to add to that, Roaring River leads to Laughing Waters. So it's basically an estuarine sanctuary which is given away, meaning the rivers run and roar and meet the beautiful ocean. And as a member of Steertown, a citizen born and raised in Steertown, I cannot use that anymore. And I know what I'm experiencing is not unique to myself on the coastline. I know it's the same thing that is happening in St. James, in Flankers Beach, Old Hospital, it's so many places. I know it is what is happening in Hanover because we saw that recently. I know it's what is going to intensify in Negril. I know it's what's happening in Old Para and probably New Para and surrounding communities. I know because I see it happening in Blue Lagoon and much of Portland gone. I know because Parity is under threat. I know because places in Westmoreland will suffer. I know because Alligator Pond is under threat and places in Manchester, Clarendon, wherever the coast is. We will be gentrified if we don't organize and stand up. And as a member of JABEM, Jamaica Beach Birthright and Environment Movement, who has helped to launch multiple cases in the courts, 5 cases, and we hope to add around 20 more because we have to organize. And now is the time. We cannot lie in bed and complain that we can't earn any money. As somebody on TikTok said, complaining that you can't do anything is the equivalent to lying in bed and not deciding not to go to work and expecting to get paid. Well, we're black people, so the world has created something worse for us. Our colonists, our imperial colonial forces created the illusion of independence. We barely have nominal political independence. Independence is not something just about parliament. It's access to the land, not just access, but ownership to the land as a collective. It's being able to hold land and not be squatters in our own nation while foreigners come in and get 22 acres and 50 as a quote unquote evangelist or a musician getting 50 acres or a businessman coming and get 88 acres to build a football club or a football school. It's happening all around us. The difference is it's in my face every day in St. Anne. And we have to change this. We have to rise up and organize and take back all this land and all these rivers. Why can't we do that? Why shouldn't we do that? In St. Lucia, it's not this way. Yes, they're trying to take it away because they're looking at the example of Jamaica and say, if we can conquer those black people, why we can't conquer those in St. Lucia? Why we can't conquer those in Barbados? Why we can't conquer those in St. Vincent? Why we can't conquer those in Trinidad? Jamaica, we must stop this. We have to organize and realize that the villain is that guy that is owning the hotel. The villain is that guy that is taking large plots of land and building housing, not housing schemes, luxury homes. The villain is that minister who claims to be Minister of Environment and having all this abundance of water, but there's no water in your taps. Mm-hmm. You can't go to the river that you used to go to. It's that minister, it's that politician who sits and watches or even enables a private company to take the watershed, which is part of the cockpit country, we're in a watershed, all the way from Trelawney to St. Anne. I'm saying this because morning has come. And even though we've been inebriated on the illusions of independence and freedom and liberation, emancipation, the full project of Marcus Garvey's emancipation still awaits. And we will have to conquer and destroy and break his detractors. Until we conquer and defeat Norman Manley, until we conquer and defeat Bustamante, then we are in trouble. And they are only the first line of defense. Spiritually, the first line of defense of this cruel imperial force that we call colonialism and that we pretend is independence. Morning has come. Wake up. So it's the
yeah. So that is, if that is not inspired, right? If that is not an inspired speech, I don't know what inspiration means, right? That young man was inspired and gave an inspirational speech to all of us. And I like what he said. He said that those people in Barbados and in Trinidad and Tobago and other parts of the Caribbean, they're using Jamaica as the blueprint of what they can get away with before they get to that part and begin to capture their land also and their beaches. And that's what he said. You know, one of the things I find very amazing in the Caribbean, and it's very sad, if this young man was talking about who is a better Caribbean nation, is Barbados or Trinidad and Tobago and whatever, you'd see like 100 people on the live because they're ready to kill him and say that this one is better and you have this competition, right? Now that he's speaking something that is relevant about our freedoms, we don't want to hear it. but we'd rather hear about who has the best KFC and the best this and the best that, which has nothing to do with anything. And that is their plan, by the way. They are pitting us against each other, and we find ourselves not standing up for what is right. Good evening, Stephen. Good day. Unfortunately, we don't have to fight if we want to keep our birth land. Correct. But what he was saying, I'm sure that you think is substantive, right? Because when you look at it, as he was suggesting, they were coming from independence celebration in Jamaica after August 6th. Trinidad and Tobago will be celebrating theirs on August 30, was it 30 or 31? That Trinidad and Tobago will be celebrating their independence. And the same thing is going to happen, the grand galas, and people are going to jump. And I'm not saying anything is wrong with that, because I think that there is a moment for nationalism and celebration of our freedoms that we have to some extent, right? Still. But the fact of the matter, we have to look beyond. Remember now that independence did not happen overnight. And it was not just something that was achieved and that was the end of it. It's something that should be continued. It has not ended. The fight has not yet ended. So it's something that we have to continue. And that is what the young man is saying. So having had independence celebration, he's telling them now, after they hung up and all of the drinking and celebrations, we need now to reflect that the country does not belong to us, and that it is being, partitioned off, and many people, foreigners, are getting it. And what are we going to do when we find ourselves having no land at all? Remember also that to the slaves, land was important. Why is it that it's no longer important for us? To the slave, that is what was important to them. Two things were important to the slave: education in terms of literacy, which we find ourselves not willing to do anymore. We don't want to read. Okay, we might go through some education, but we don't want to read and to expose ourselves to very important knowledge, right? And another thing, land. They knew that without land, that they were not free. Free access to land. After slavery in the United States, what did the whites get? The poor whites. They got an acre of land and a mule. That wasn't only symbolic. It was what gave them a start. And that is why white Americans are way ahead of black Americans, because they got their acre and a mule. Black people in America after slavery did not get that. Okay, so if we are now finding our way in the Caribbean right here, where we're peopled by large numbers of people of African descent, yet we do not have access to land because we don't own the land, then what's going to happen to us? We have to begin now to think, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings, Brother Demont. Inspire. Have been hearing that rhetoric for decades, and the going republic won't change anything. You're correct. Now, when I say inspirational, I mean that sometimes we need to be motivated, just like somebody will tell you to get up and study, and probably will give you a cup of tea or something to go and study. Yeah, it's inspirational in the sense it's not new, as you're saying, but inspirational in the sense that it should be prodding us, goading us to get up and do what we need to do to fight for our freedom. Black people need more than Bennett is saying, welcome to the live. Black people need to wake up. Yes, we're fast asleep. I think what we think is going to happen is that we're going to have this revolutionary person to come, and that person is going to save us from enslavement. And that is not going to happen, right? You have to save yourself from enslavement, and you will have to fight, of course, collectively, because unity is strength. But if we do not fight for our individual freedoms, then nobody can fight for that freedom for us. And it's amazing how some of you are also very irreligious. At the same time, you're waiting for a man, right? You tell to people, oh, you're waiting for a God to come out of the sky. Okay, and then you're waiting for a man, okay, like yourself, who has the same thing like you, right? The same potential to free you. So what up with that? It's not religious. It's not you're taking that person an idol and that is your God. Okay, we have to wake up now and say that something is wrong, and we need to tell our leaders that things cannot progress in the way it is or they are progressing. So that is what we have. Any comments, any questions about what's happening. What is happening in your neck of the woods? Trinidad and Tobago, what are they selling off? And what are you concerned about? I think I heard something from Guyana. Those of you from other Caribbean territories, please let me know in the chat what is the major issues confronting the lands and the resources being sold out to foreign investment. I know that the energy in Trinidad and Tobago, that's the oil and the gas, is being sold out to foreign entities. We saw in Venezuela, in recent times, where Trump just went and took out the president, right, and decided to capture everything that they have in Venezuela, and yet still we are not weak. We have a sitting president of the United States who just went to a country that was of no sort of threat to the United States and just took out the president, whether or not we agreed with him or we liked President, what's his name, the former president, Maduro, has nothing to do with anything. It's about being able to respect people's sovereignty, right? And we have to study to do what? The ones that study keeping the not so educated getting lead astray. Well, the whole purpose of education is not, as we're saying, schooling. Schooling and education and being titled is not equivalent to what full education in terms of mobilizing people is about, right? So for the most part, Pedro, most of the region we are not educated in the true sense of the word. We are literate in terms of having school titles or degrees, and we can do a job, but that does not suggest that we are educated. Stephen Knight is saying there are some Black people awakening, but unfortunately we have some politicians and so-called leaders in our community who have sold us out. Right. And I think it's time for us now to question everything that everybody says, including myself. Question everything that everybody tells you. Don't take everything for granted. And because you like somebody, it means therefore that you are going to put your faith and confidence in that person 100%. No, you've got to do your diligent research. And I think that's what we do right now. We follow like Dr. Umar Johnson's, and everything comes out of his mouth you agree with. And that is not critical thinking. Right? Because there are things that he might say that might not be true or is not the right interpretation. The same thing with me, the same thing with, anybody who comes on the platform here. You've got to do your diligent and your due diligence, right? So that you can know and you can be convicted of what you think is right and what you think is truth. Because at the end of the day, it's truth that we're trying to gather, right? A lot of what we're seeing, a lot of what we're hearing, a lot of what we're reading, right, is just half truths. So we want to put everything, all the puzzle together to see how we can come to an understanding and awareness of the entire truth. One of the beauties of studying religion, for example, the Bible, for example, is that it's a puzzle. The Bible never told us everything. Do you know that? It gives you a sweep of history and a sweep of the future. And God expects you now to put the puzzle together, right? So you read from Genesis to Revelation and you try to put the puzzle and until you get the chain of truth together. He did not just tell us everything. He could and tell us everything so we don't have to use our lazy brains, but God is not like that. God wants you to think. So he gives other people, even secular people, he gives them knowledge. Secular people who don't believe in him, he gives them knowledge for you to access that knowledge and use the Bible as the puzzle to put it together. And we have to do that with the news too. We're not going to get everything from CNN. You're not going to get everything from Barbados channels or the news channel or Barbados Today. You're not going to get everything from the Trinidad Express. You have to what? To read multiple sources and try to put everything together to see what really is truth. Now, that requires a lot of work and a lot of thinking, which many people just don't want to do. And that is what we find ourselves in at the moment. People just don't want to read for themselves because it's too much of a work and a challenge. We'd rather gossip, right? It makes time to more gossip and talk about other people and what they're not doing. Pedro is saying he probably related to a black slavery, Anthony Johnson. Who is Anthony Johnson? A black slavery, Anthony Johnson. I'm saying Umar Johnson. Who is Anthony Johnson? Yeah, so this is where we are in terms of selling out our region. I would also, recommend Life and Debt by the story that was the video, the documentary that was made about Jamaica. Try to watch that documentary as well, because that also unpacks a lot of things happening in the Caribbean and how the Caribbean has been, this process has of being sold off has been happening from day one, right? But particularly during the 1990s and beyond, we are seeing where the total or the islands are being sold out to these people. And we are told that tourism should be the center of our economy. And tourism really means slave 2.0, right? It's not independence, right? We know what happens at these hotels. We know that many of these hotels, we don't own them. We don't even own the land on which they sit. So, tell me, tourism is and I'm not against tourism, right? I just don't think that tourism should be the bedrock of our economy. That should not be. But our politicians are trying to, transition us into a new form of slavery. Then we have to, and if we are rose up tomorrow, then I'm going to put the military on the streets because they have changed the laws, correct, to protect themselves and the foreigners who come to so-called buy this land. Absolutely. That's what they're doing right now, that you can't do anything. And that's what they did in Colombia, as we're seeing that right now with the earthquake in Colombia, that the people who are planning to protest against the incoming president, de la Espriella, they are not going to be able to do that right now because the police are going to be on the road. So you're correct, Stephen Knight. We are up against very, very, but remember too, let's not forget that during slavery, the slaves were also up against these soldiers, call them the ones who patrolled, right? They were the patrollers who would go across the region, particularly in the United States, and they would try to see what the slaves were doing, and they would watch them like hawks, right? So, and they would be beaten. So we must understand. Good evening, Michelle. Pedro is saying, research him now, and you're here. Well, I can't research him now because send me something about him. Hello, good evening, Michelle Forster, because I'm talking right now. I don't know if I can research Anthony Johnson. I'm sure there are lots of Anthony Johnsons in the world, but tell me which one you're referring to. Are you talking about Umar Johnson or Dr. Anthony Johnson? I know so many Anthony Johnsons that I don't know who you're talking about. Yeah, so any questions, any other response? We're looking at, for those of you who are joining, the Caribbean being sold off, who owns our land and resources, and we're telling people that, we don't own our resources. The foreign investors do, and we have to wake up. The Chinese are owning the Americans, right? And all of the others who are coming down there. And even our fellow Caribbean people, as we saw in Barbados and where they protested, were Sandals. And Sandals is a Jamaican brand, right? With Jamaican owners. But Stewart, well, he's now deceased, but his son is now, what's his name? His son is Andre. Stewart, I forgot his name. Stephen Knight is saying, yeah, nobody's against terrorism, but on the other, tourism, but on the other hand, these foreigners have to respect us. Correct. And what is happening? They won't respect us if we don't have what? Equal rights at the table. If we don't have, like, let us say we should have ownership of half of the hotels there. Okay, or 3/4 of the hotels, and think then we would have leverage. But if we don't own any of them, then what sort of leverage do we have? Or very few of them we own. And the ones we own, they are in bed with the foreigners, the Butch Stewarts and the other hoteliers in Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados and across the region. So our own people are in bed with the foreign investors, and they unite against us, the people, because the reason why they unite is they unite over money and ownership and power. Okay, that is what they unite around, and that is what we must understand. Okay, so yeah, So, any other point that you're raising, people? Let me see what we should be having the chat full with what is happening. What is happening in your neck of the woods? Those who are living in Antigua, Barbuda, Anguilla. What is happening in your neck of the woods in terms of your land being sold out to foreign elites and investors? What's going on in your neck of the woods? I think I've spoken a lot, showed you a lot of what is happening in Jamaica and in some cases in Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago. What's happening in Trinidad and Tobago? Tobago is also known to be a tourist attraction area. It's not as industrialized as Trinidad, my understanding. So what is happening there? We know that we talked about the surveillance equipment that was placed by the United States last year, but for some reason, apart from that, we don't hear a lot coming out of Tobago anytime. We always hear about Trinidad. Pedro Jamat is saying in 1655, he won a historic case to keep his slave for life. I got you. So I will do some research on him after I've gotten off the platform. That's Anthony Johnson you're suggesting. Any other and yes, so what's happening in Guyana? We know that the oil boom in Guyana, but people are talking that they're not getting the benefits. They're not seeing the benefits of the oil boom in Guyana. What's going on with that? What is going on with that? I'd like to hear from other parts of what we call the Caribbean region, even though I know that Guyana, you are in South America, but you are Caribbean culturally. So what is happening in Guyana? Steve Knight is saying our politicians are the problem, and this is why some of them do not want opposition. Yes. And then an uninformed populace also is the problem. We have to accept responsibility. And we're saying our population, they are so licky, as we'd say in Jamaica, in terms of they want to have to live this sort of convenient lifestyle. We want to pattern what we see in the United States and in Europe, yet still we don't understand that these things come at a cost. So we want to see our highways, looking like what you see in North America and in Canada and also in Europe, and then so they tell the people to come, right? We want to have lots of KFCs, we want to have lots of McDonald's and Burger Kings, right? And all of these things come at a cost, right? We want to have high-rise, apartments and hotels, so we can say, look at the development. Jamaica is being developed, Barbados is being developed, but at what cost? And we are not against development, but we know that we are not, like New York. We are not in New York. We don't want to become a New York. We don't want to have to become a Miami. Okay, we are Caribbean and we want to maintain our beauty. Why do you think the tourists come to go to Barbados? Because they want that natural beauty. They want to move away from all of these high-rise buildings that they're seeing, these artificial buildings in New York and also in Miami and these industrialized cities, and they want to go where they can get some sort of nature and they can connect with nature and the beauty that Barbados and on these Caribbean countries have to offer. The United is saying the Guyanese government do not care about their people. Look at that boat that went down the other day. Yes, that was a terrible ordeal, and I'm still not sure what happened. What was the boat doing, and where were they going? It was something that I did not really pay much attention to when it happened. It was a very sad undertaking, and is something that perhaps I should do more research on. Yeah, so we are seeing where our islands are being sold out. I don't know if many of us are interested in that topic, in what is happening, because I think you'd be sharing your opinions in terms of what is happening. I don't see your being very passionate. When you're passionate, you write. That's what I know. If we're talking about Black people and what is happening and slavery and Nolan Wells, we see a lot of comments coming about racism and all of that stuff. Are we talking about the fact that they're taking away our land, whether you are actually Indian or you're Black or you're white? They're taking away your land. Right? They're taking away your land. Right now, it's not going to be racialized slavery that's coming. It's going to be a enslavement of the population, And if you do not, accede, then you are going to be slaves, whether you're white or you're Black or you're purple. All right. That is where we're moving right now into. his enslavement of the entire human race. But we are always at the bottom. Black people are always at the bottom. So we know that it will be worse for us. When they do something to Hispanics or they do something to whites, we are always at the bottom, and we get the worst treatment. So we also have to look at it as a race. I understand that. Michelle Foster is saying, I love Barbados. Last time we went, we attended a church conference and stayed at a plantation, so we learned a lot of history during our stay. I have not heard one person who has ever been to Barbados and not like it. Yeah, I think that everybody who that I know that have been to Barbados have always loved Barbados and what it has to offer. They say it's a peaceful, orderly country. Now, Michelle Forster is saying it was fun driving the roundabouts. Yes, people, lots of videos are on YouTube and people talk highly about Barbados. Pedro Jamot is saying, so they're selling the land and playing an emotional trick on the masses with reparations. Absolutely. Now we're talking. That is a beautiful point you're raising here, Pedro Jamot. Because when you look at what Miss Miyamot is doing, and she's requesting $4.9 trillion for reparations for what happened during slavery, and yet still she is also selling out the land and Barbadians off their land. So what does that have to do with reparations? Are we getting back the money to buy back the land? It doesn't make any sense. So what you're saying here, Pedro Jamot, is spot on. So they're doing a lot of things that are contradictory, right? And we don't see the rationale in what they're doing. And that is why we can't believe the reparation movement, because what the politicians are doing in terms of aiding and abetting the foreign investors to take away our land, yet still they're requesting the same descendants of the same people, right? These are descendants of slavery, and they're coming and they're buying up the land, taking away our land from us, and then they're telling us that they're about to give us reparations. That does not make any sense, does it? And that is what Pedro Demott is here saying. So this is a sort of conversation that we have to have, and we have the thinking that we need in the region to question and to challenge what our politicians say to us and say, but you said here, but look at what you're doing there, right? And they don't cohere. What you're saying, what you're doing, just do not cohere. So we need to know what you are about and what you're doing. But we're not necessarily doing that. We listen to them and we say, oh, she did that, and we vote for her. She did that, or she said that, and we don't try to connect the dots to see that it just does not make any sense. Yeah, so when are we going to wake up? When are we going to become thinkers in the region, right? I don't know when, but I pray that we will become very, very soon. We are discussing, for those of you who are just joining, we're looking at the Caribbean is being sold out. Who owns our resources? And Africa is saying the mentality of the people in Jamaica is the main reason why Jamaica is plagued with poor leadership. Correct. Because our politicians in Jamaica, politics trumps everything. It trumps thinking. It trumps what is right and what is wrong. They just don't care. Once their political leader is in power, that is what suffices. They don't care what happens. And then they cry when they are struggling. That is what happens in Jamaica. Her family, Pedro is saying, was high in the colonial order, probably owned. Right. I'm happy you're saying that, Pedro Demott, because I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said the same thing, that Miss Mia Motley, her family is high up on the colonial pole, right? And she's connected to, I'm sure, maybe not necessarily very close, but she's connected to some of the colonial masters, the slave masters, because she is one of the elites of Barbados, my understanding. So who is she actually reimbursing with her $4.9 trillion? That's a lot of money, right? Of course, we deserve it. Don't get me wrong. Please acknowledge that I'm not laughing at what is happening, because we do deserve, African people do deserve reparations. But it's the way they're doing it and the deceit surrounding it that we're questioning. So So don't believe for one moment, and don't say to people that I'm saying I don't believe in reparations. I do believe in reparations, but it's just the way and the people who are doing it, and I know that they're hypocrites and they're not real, right? If real people were doing it, and like Marcus Garvey, he was alive, or probably Malcolm X and some of these people who seem to have been real people, then yes, the CLR James and these people. But the people that we have now, our current crop of leaders, are just going after money. They are not willing to empower the people, the likes of which these people are doing, like the Marcus Garveys and the CLR James. So please understand that, all right? I don't want anyone to leave here thinking that I'm anti-reparations and what they're trying to do. I'm not anti-reparations. I'm anti the way. And tomorrow, by the way, we'll be looking at the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice versus the Privy Council. And I've been saying that too. I'm not against the Caribbean Court of Justice. I'm against the corruption in the region. And there's a lot of corruption charges now going around about the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is something that we should be looking at, because justice denied is going to be something that if we are denied proper justice, then we know we are slaves, you know. Pedro Tomato is saying Black men were in parliament years before the so-called independence and emancipation. Yes, but it was just like now, it was symbolic. It was a symbolic gesture, Pedro Tomato. It was not because they wanted to give Black people power. It was just a token, a tokenization of the Black race, which we are now doing right now too, right? And Dr. Umar Johnson said this very well. He said that even though you might have multiple millionaires, Black millionaires in the United States, it does not mean, therefore, that the Black poverty in the United States is not extensive, because that is a token of white people trying to placate Black people that, oh, things have improved because we have no more millionaires, and we had a president, Barack Hussein Obama, who was in the in leadership. All right, so all of them are correct. That is what they're after: money. It's after money. They're not after leadership. They're after money, and that's what we have to understand. That's the difference between that crop of leadership of yesteryear, the Owen authors and other people, and the current crop now. Michael Mann did not die a rich person. He died. He could, take care of his needs, but he was not. He didn't die with a lot of money, right? As our politicians are now dying with. Now, African is saying it shows you that many of these Black leaders in the Caribbean are neo-colonialists, right? They are definitely true. And Marie saying that's quite true. There is quite a lot of tokenization being practiced. Yes, it's all about symbolic gesture. So if you have some Black people in Parliament or in Congress, it means therefore that they love Black people, or they're there to do your bidding. One of the things that they do also, once they put these people there, you will think that they're there to represent you and to do what you need them to do for you. But no, that's not what they're there for. They're just there as symbolic representation to make you feel good about yourselves, that they're on TV and they're making lofty speeches, and you get fooled by that, and then the system, destroys you. Pedro Jamati saying you prefer the Privy Council is saying that the CCJ can't do the work. Amazing. Well, no, I think that it's almost like saying if you want to study in the American system, go, right? And if you want to study in the British colonial system in the Caribbean, then do it. Democratic society, you choose what you will. I'm not suggesting that if you go to study at a university in the United States, it means that it's better than the University of the West Indies. Far from it. What I'm suggesting here, if you want to study in Cuba or wherever you want to study, what I'm suggesting is that we should have freedom to choose. Why? Because the system is corrupt. Why do you think many people opt not to do their PhDs at UWI, whether it's in Trinidad or in Barbados or Jamaica? Because it's just too corrupt. And people will have them there for 15, 20 years because they want to stand on them. They want to crush them. They don't want them to get to their level. So people move on and go to Canada. They go to Britain. They go to wherever and get their PhDs in 2-3 years. And they have their PhD. Why are you going to stay in Barbados or Jamaica and have a PhD, take you 15 years? It's ridiculous what we do here in the Caribbean. So if we can do that at the academic level, what do you think they're going to do at the legal, the judiciary level? right? They are going to hold, they're not going to be giving us, the rights that we need, all right? Listen, that ain't coherent. It is coherent. It's liberty. It's freedom. Freedom means that you have a choice. So if you want to go to the Privy Council, then you go to the Privy Council. If you want to go to the Caribbean Court of Justice, then you have that right. But don't put your eggs in one basket, because when you do so, then you're trapped and you might not get the justice that perhaps you need to get. I am no, for example, Vibes Cartel fan. I don't listen to him. I don't like his music. I don't like his personality, by the way. But the fact of the matter is that he won by going to the Privy Council, because had he gone to the Caribbean Court of Justice, it seemed that he would not have won. And he wanted a fair trial. And it seemed that he got one. I don't know. But the fact is that you want to have that option, Pedro. You don't want to say that. I'm not saying that the Caribbean Court of Justice is the people there are not qualified. They are qualified. They're well educated and they're very sophisticated, right? Well, I'll talk about that tomorrow. Let me not discuss this sort of thing today, because we're not talking about the Caribbean Court of Justice. I just alluded to that because I'm talking about something else. The same PhD is accredited by the colonizers. Yes, but even though it's accredited by the colonizers, because everything is money, everything, the language that we're using, just about everything we use here in the West, we got them from the colonial masters. But that doesn't mean that you're not free, because these are tools, and tools depend on the way how you use them. Music is a tool, right? Money is a tool. Education is a tool. It depends on how you use it. Now, if you want to use education to indoctrinate you, right? You don't want to read for yourselves. You don't want to study for yourselves. Then you are going to be controlled. The same thing with religion, Religion can control you if you want religion to control you. Religion can set you free if you want it to set you free. Education can set you free if you so desire to have it set you free, but it can also enslave you because it's a tool, and it depends on how you use the tool. Government is necessary, and government can enslave you, but government can equally free you, depending. It's a tool. How do we use the tool? Right? And that's what Pedro Jamal, when people are saying that, oh, we should all speak Patois in Jamaica and we should ignore English, I say to them, no, because Patois is a tool, and that tool is not going to help you to connect with the world. English is going to help you to connect with the world. So don't tell me about colonial language and it was given by Great Britain and all that stuff, because you can sing all you want to sing. Patois is not going to connect you with the scientific knowledge and all of the things you need to know and the technologies of the world. It's not going to do it. And we have our pseudo-intellectuals in Jamaica talking about, oh, we have to use Patois because that is, it shows our African connection and all of that nonsense. And even Creole, I'm telling them, has influence of Western languages. Spanish and Portuguese words are in the Jamaican Creole, among other words. So, what are we talking about? Shouting, don't cut it. Shouting in terms of what? So we have to understand that language, the court system, all of these things, whether the CCJ or the Privy Council, these are just tools to be used, but it is how we use them. And we want to have the access we have to more tools, the better. The access you have to more languages, whether you're studying Spanish or Portuguese or French, the better for you, the more competitive you are. Not that you want to become more Western. What you're doing is to want to free yourself. A language is a tool to educate and to expose yourselves to the world. Stop worrying about colonization then and learn to maneuver it. Well, if you don't learn about it, how are you going to maneuver it, Pedro? Right? You have to first learn about it, and you've got to talk about, the flaws of it and what it's doing, right? So that you can be able to maneuver it. When I'm studying a language, I have to speak about it, the grammar, the rudiment of the language, so that I can be able to use that tool. If I don't study the language, then I won't be able, there are people who don't study the language and they do some talking, right? But do they really know how to maneuver the language in a way that somebody who has studied the language is able to do? They might not be able to do so, right? So that's what I'm saying. So you have to study, you have to talk about it. So there's no way, Mr. Pedro, you're very cheeky sometimes in your comments, but yeah, Bring them on. Then we have so we're talking about the Caribbean being sold out. Who owns our land and resources? And we're saying that we don't own them. Unfortunately, our political elites and our economic elites, they have allowed our lands or resources to be sold out to the highest bidder. And our people, unfortunately, are being sold out. No, I'm not double speaking. There's a difference between double speaking and being nuanced. What you want me to do is saying one is something is black and something is white, and I'm saying no, it's not just black and white, right? So yes, I can talk about colonization. I can talk about the fact that the CCJ is perhaps needs to be, for those who want it, keep it. It's a tool. For those who don't want it, they should have the choice of going to the Privy Council if they want and they're willing to pay for it. I don't think that's double speak. I just think that that is what practicality means, right? It is what practicality means. Marcus Garvey, was a person who, he used standard English very well. And one of the reasons he was saying, he said, Black people should learn the language even better than the colonial masters. That's what he said. We should master that language even much better. And all the languages that the colonial masters, have actually bequeathed to us, whether it's Spanish or it's French or it is Portuguese, he says that we should master them. Why? Because they are tools to be used and they are manipulating us with their language. So why don't we manipulate their language, to them? Because it's a tool. That's what it is. So let us use it, whether economics. Why do you think some people talk about China? China uses Western economic structure, right, and ideology, but they have what? They mastered it. And they're now using it to manipulate the West, right? And that is what we as Black people should have done. Remember that Chinese started out with the low wages, and they had the sweatshops and all of the Sorry about that. I'm back. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so there is a place for patois in our school system. Research have shown that it can be used to aid learning at the primary school level. Well, the studies that they're coming out with are not necessarily believable, but do we have the money to actually do both language at the same time? I think we should put more money into mastering standard English. We could also learn, any language. By the way, Studying any language can help you to master your native language. Studying Spanish can also help you to master the grammar and the syntax of English. So I would say yes, because studying any language, but at the same time, patois is not going to give us. Everybody in Jamaica speaks patois for the most part. The majority, not everybody, but the majority of people in Jamaica have mastered patois. So we don't need to talk about that right now. English is what we should be paying attention to, because that is what is going to give us the sort of tool we need to master and to dominate, if we could, our colonial masters. Have no problem with your opinion, however, I disagree. Yeah, no problem, and no problem in disagreeing, because that is what we are here to do: to agree, to disagree, to disagree, to agree, or vice versa. Yeah, so this is what we are saying here, people, that we have to be able to use the resources that we have, or tools, but we must understand that if we're going to find ourselves, just reflecting on the fact that we can just vote somebody in and the person is going to change things in the Caribbean, it's not going to happen. We've got to understand the system was not designed, the political system, economic system was not designed to suit our interest, to free us, to liberate us, and to make us, and to decolonize us. In fact, the same system is here to colonize us, because the system never changed in the first place, right? It never changed. So we have to change it right now if we can. All right. Any other comments, questions before we end the live? All right. Thank you so much for joining. And tomorrow we'll look at the CCJ and the Privy Council. It's a very important topic we need to discuss, because, without justice, then how can we survive in the region, right? We are going to become a dictatorship. So we have to get our acts together, and we need to educate ourselves on how the IMF, right? We need to do that too. One of the things about that, whenever I publish video on the IMF and the World Bank, people just don't click on it. It's like we don't want to hear about it. Seems like thank you so much, thank you, Marie. It's almost like they don't care about the IMF and how situations work. They think it's not something that they need to understand. For some reason, I don't know why. But it has always been my experience. Thank you so much for joining. We'll talk tomorrow. Bye.